Welcome to Breaking the News on this Monday night. I'm Janice Shortle. We're going to talk about the state court appearance today of the political assassin that murdered Mark and Melissa Hortman and tried to do the same of all the members of the Hoffman family. Vance Boelter, you'll remember, just over a week ago, was sentenced in federal court to spend the rest of his life in prison plus 40 years for those assassinations and attempted assassinations. But he has a trial coming up in Hennepin County. Lou Raguse was at his first appearance in the county today, and he's going to talk about what he saw there because it was a little bit unusual.
Yeah, and if you want to skip straight to what made it unusual, should we set it up first?
I'm going to set it up first
Okay.
because I'm not going to give this defendant the benefit of having his story come first. I want to know from you. You and I talked about it. A first question a lot of people ask is, why is there even going to be a trial in Hennepin County after he's already pled guilty in federal court? We know he did it, and he's going to prison for the rest of his life. What's the point?
Well, the primary stated reason by Hennepin County Mayor Moriarty is that a federal conviction potentially could be subject to a presidential pardon, whereas a state conviction would not. And that kind of plays into, if you remember, the Derek Chauvin case. He's convicted in both federal and state courts. So when there were questions and rumors that perhaps President Trump might give a pardon to Derek Chauvin, the governor and Attorney General Keith Ellison said, well, he's also convicted in state court. So if that did happen, he's not getting out of jail because he's also convicted here. So it's kind of that same idea kind of playing out.
It's an insurance policy,
right?
basically.
Exactly, because it would be life in prison, just like the federal one is life in prison. There really would be no difference other than he's convicted in both sides.
In addition to that line of thinking, which is completely logical, I remember from the federal sentencing, it was specifically, I think, Mark Hortman's father talked about wanting to have a trial. So how much of the victims' families, if he really does want a trial or some of them want trial, are put into a decision like this from Hennepin County Attorney Moriarty?
Well, she definitely meets with victim families and, here's what they have to say about it. I don't know that it's a uniform feeling on it across the board. I mean, parents, children, spouses, the other side, the Hoffmans, they all might have a little bit different feeling about it all.
Right.
And that would be completely normal as well. Also, it's actually up to Boelter if there ends up being a trial, because he could just plead guilty just like he did in federal court.
Okay.
And that's his choice.
Okay. So let's fast forward then till this afternoon, I guess. He makes his first appearance. Mr. Boelter is now in the custody of Hennepin County. He's been transferred into a state facility so he can face this potential trial. Typically what happens at a first appearance, which is what he had today, is what?
Essentially, they set the bail and they talk a little bit about scheduling. They don't even take a plea, which would be, of course, at the very beginning, not guilty. They always plead not guilty at first, and later on they might change it to guilty. But in Hennepin County, they don't actually do that. They just talk about the bail amount. You could call it a bail hearing rather than a first appearance for all intents and purposes.
Okay.
And then they talk about when the next court date will be.
But today, Vance Boelter put an end to the normalcy. He had something to say.
Right. And to set the scene, Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were there. The Hortman's children were there. Other family supporters that have been to several of these court hearings, they were all there. So this was a all hands on deck. Everyone was there at this hearing. And at the very end, Vance Boelter has a court-appointed attorney, taxpayer-funded, with the Public Defender's Office of Hennepin County. And the attorney said, Judge, Mr. Boelter has a couple of questions. And Judge Juan Hoyos allowed him to speak. And so he complained about his health and how it's deteriorated since he's been in jail. He claims that he's lost 35 pounds in the first 49 days, has other vertigo and other conditions. He claimed that he hasn't been able to physically meet face-to-face with a pastor or a priest, so he says that his religious rights are being withheld from him. He claimed that his First Amendment rights are being held because he wasn't able to give the FBI a full statement. He said within the first 5 hours that he was arrested, he wanted to give a full statement to the FBI, but they wouldn't take it. And he said he days later wanted to do the same thing, and they never took it from him. And so he was basically implying that his story has not been told. And then the biggest thing was that he asked the judge if Senator Amy Klobuchar could be compelled to come and testify.
Why?
He said that 5 different times between 2015 and 2023, at taxpayer expense, he went to Washington, D.C. with others representing Minnesota counties and met with Minnesota officials, including Amy Klobuchar. And he said if those conversations are relevant to these charges, can she be compelled to come and testify against me, or, quote, is she above the law in this case? That's what he said. And, if to read between the lines, he was appointed on this governor's workforce development board,
right,
originally by Governor Dayton,
right,
and then reappointed by Governor Walz. And that tenure was between 2016 and 2023. So the timeline is about the same. It seemed to me that's what he was talking about, but I haven't been able to confirm if that board ever went to Washington in the first place, let alone anything else.
I want to rewind a bit into the time last year after Boelter had been captured while he was on the run after he killed all of these people. He floated some similar BS. And then acting U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson was asked a question by you about his conspiracy theories, basically, that he's the trained assassin or whatever it was. And it was immediately shot down.
Right.
Like, that's not true.
And so that was a big information dump at the time.
Right.
For us. We're digesting a lot of new things all at once here. Part of it was when they searched his car, when they arrested him, they found a letter that he had written to FBI Director Kash Patel. And in it, he claimed that he was secretly trained as an assassin by the government and was carrying out missions all over the world, and that he was recruited by Governor Walz to assassinate Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith, our senators in Washington.
That's not what he's saying today. He's saying something else.
Well, so I raised my hand and I said, it sounds silly to have to ask, but was he secretly trained? And Joe Thompson said, no, absolutely not. So that the conspiracy has been shut down by federal prosecutors. Of course, conspiracies live on in the social media comments, as I'm sure they will here too. But this never came up during the federal case, like in court at all.
Right.
And, he apologized at his sentencing and took responsibility.
That was my next question. So how a week and a half ago was he sorry for all the pain that he caused, anyone that he caused pain to, and now he's coming back again saying, oh, Your Honor, here's how my rights have been violated, and here's yet another conspiracy theory in front of the victims. Right,
and they were there, and they kind of collectively sighed, and several of them, shook their heads because it was kind of like, here we go again. That was the feeling in the courtroom as he did that.
What's the judge's reaction to it?
The judge, to answer the question, said, that's not a question for me. You need to talk to your lawyer about how you want to present your case. Okay. And then regarding the thing about the priest, he said, well, that's something we could look into and see what the reasons are for this or that. The judge was very diplomatic about it all. But definitely what was different was you generally don't see defendants having a Q&A with the judge during their first appearance like this.
I've never seen that.
Usually a first appearance is right after someone's arrested. It's a little bit different in this case because he's arrested a year ago and already had a trial in a different court. But usually when they will try to ask questions because they don't know what's going on, with them. And the judge will usually shut it down and say, talk to your attorney. Don't talk about your case here. Don't tell me these things about your case. Talk to your attorney. And that's kind of, to stop them from incriminating themselves when they don't know their rights, exactly.
Right. This man knows his rights.
Right. And so it was different, as we say in Minnesota.
So he also brought up a couple of other things, and I'll just mention them, even though they seem like small beans here. He claims he wants to meet with a pastor face to face. He has had access to online religious counsel. He has had access to therapy. He's in medium security, so he interacts with other inmates. I mean, to the general public right now, listening to this man, bitch about what he's not getting, doesn't really land very well.
It's offensive to the sensibilities of the average person. That's a good way to put it.
You're so diplomatic. And so after this happens, he doesn't enter a plea.
No, and that's normal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you walk away from this hearing with all of these bizarre accusations and then claims of his poor treatment, small violin, what happens next? Does that change what happens next? Or is it just he's just blowing off smoke in the room?
Well, one thing that could be kind of true. But we were kind of wondering if there would be any sort of, when they talk about scheduling, if there would be any sort of hint, that this could come to a quick resolution, i.e. a guilty plea. There was none of that. They just set the next court date, which is September 2nd. And between now and then, he'll have more time to meet with his new attorneys in the Public Defender's Office of Hennepin County and, come up with their game plan as far as how to handle the case.
Because he was convicted in federal court and now has been moved to the custody of Hennepin County, does he stay in Hennepin County or does he go back and wait for his next court date in federal court?
Well, that was something that they went over today because the prosecution wants him to stay in Hennepin County to make it easier. But his defense said that since he's in the general population in Sherburne County, that's where they hold the federal inmates, and if he came to Hennepin, he'd be back in solitary, that they want to keep him in Sherburne. And so Judge Hoyos said that he needs more information. So he basically asked him, send me more emails on the details of these two conflicting ideas here, and then he'll come up with an answer. But for now, Boelter will go back to Sherburne until this is sorted out.
Do you have any indication from sources if this will go to trial, or you don't know?
I don't know. I think the best tea leaves that I saw today was him talking about potential testimony, which testimony comes in a trial. Mm-hmm. So that at this point, I would say that it looks more like it's headed to trial than not based on his comments today, unless he just was blowing smoke.
When he makes allegations and accusations about the governor and now Senator Amy Klobuchar, who was running for governor, what is she supposed to do with that? I'm sure you asked the senator's office for comment, but isn't it
right? I reached out to see if it's true that she may have met with him, mm-hmm. and I asked if she has any relevant information to his case, because a judge would not make her come and testify if there's really no potential.
That's what I meant.
Relevant information.
He can't just say you got to talk to Amy Klobuchar. Yeah, so he doesn't get to say.
I don't have the answers to those questions, but as far as what will happen, she won't be forced to come in and testify if she's never met the man.
What kind of read did you get from the tone and tenor of the courtroom for the Hoffman and the Hortman's family, kind of having to, as you said, kind of eye roll, here we go again. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't even really here we go again, because they
thought they had turned a corner.
Yeah, they thought they had gotten there after the federal. Not that they forgive him or that all's well and good, but they thought they were done and that he wasn't going to get to open his mouth and say stuff like this.
Right.
But he did.
It looked like it was hard for them to take. And I don't know about their private conversations. They all convened for a solid 20 minutes after that hearing. And I'm sure that there was a little bit of venting going on because it looked like it was hard for them to take.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but I mean, we're talking about a convicted political assassin, so I guess nothing should be that surprising. We appreciate
and you know what? To that point, it is a little uncharted territory that we're going through this second trial after the. I guess all bets are off. You might expect him to just go in and plead guilty because what's the difference?
Yeah.
Or he's going to try to say his piece now because he didn't the first time around. We don't know. And it makes it harder to predict.
That's a good point that you bring up, because you and I were both on the receiving end of Mr. Boelter's emails. In the very beginning, he was really wanting to tell his story, but not interested on this side of the receiving end. So perhaps you're right. Perhaps this is his last chance to say what he wants to say. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see how this plays out. We appreciate you going to that hearing, Lou. We appreciate you being on BTN+.
Always.
We appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Jana Shortle.